I sat on the footpath outside my Mithadir office, at the same spot where 40 years ago, after my mother's death, I had put down my bundle of belongings and observed the 14-foot wide unpaved alley that crossed over at both ends of the street. Then as now, Allahu Akbar, the mesmeric call for the Fajr prayers cascaded down from the minaret of the Green Mosque, and the sounds of life responded and increased as the day moved on. The flood of people had grown more dense with the passage of time, and noise was louder. It was the microcosm of the nation, an uncontrolled, disorderly mass. Pickups, donkey carts, trailers, and tongas pushed against each other. Scooters zigzagged, finding ways through the smallest spaces, and rickshaws spat black fumes from torn silences. Frustrated drivers pressed their palms on the horns of stranded cars and moved little by little, shouting and abusing pedestrians who ignored them, and crisscrossed in and out, scampering in all directions amidst the mayhem. The garbage dump at the corner was no more, as for many old people who had inhabited the area then. The middle-aged from that time were Benton people, laboriously surviving the fast pace of the present. The youth had grown middle-aged and were replaced by boys and tight jeans, playing to tunes of film songs that played from transistor radios. In keeping with the times, the new generation of children ran helter-skelter. Yet nothing had really changed. Everything looked exactly the same. I stared up at the old, decrepit buildings that still buzzed, with the humdrum of lower middle class existence. Lines of clothes still dried on balconies, and thin bamboo blinds still hung across entrances, concealing narrow staircases that ran up many floors and branched out at every landing into cramped apartments. But 65 years had whitened the hair on my head and beard, and in the building behind me, everything had transformed. 8-foot dispensary I had bought in 1951 had extended to cover the second and third floors. From it, I had stretched out to reach those who could not reach me, spreading a network that crept like a web at the grassroots level, covering the length and breadth of Pakistan. Controlled from one room, called the Tower. By the year 1990, the Edhi Foundation had put into place into public service the largest single fleet of 450 ground ambulances. We estimated 800 by 1997. The nationwide service was equipped with the latest communication system and covered the remotest areas of the country. With an unparalleled record of swift response by the year 1990, over 10 million people had been served. Keeping in view the greater interest of the nation, we had donated 50 ambulances to various government and non-government organizations. An air ambulance service with 2 fixed-wing crafts and 1 helicopter began operation in the year 1987. Within the next 5 years, the project envisaged the acquisition of 5 helicopters and 5 fixed-wing aircraft, for which purpose an optimum sum for operations, maintenance, and personnel expenses had been set aside in a fixed deposit. Army Aviation had trained our pilots on their own equipment. Additional training had been approved. Sanctions for fuel and lubricants on gratis basis were obtained from oil companies, and civil aviation authorities had waived licensing, registration, and other fees towards the expansion of the service. Transportation of physicians and specialists to remote areas, inter-hospital transfers, quick transportation of blood plasma and vital transplant organs, search and rescue works in deserts, mountains, flood-affected areas, and the sea, geological surveys of underground water in the famine-stricken areas of Thar, Cholistan, and Uttar, and medical assistance to companies involved in research and exploration in remote areas was the aim of the air ambulance service. 240 EV welfare centers operated in 100 cities and towns. A chain of centers based on the 25-kilometer emergency project had become operative on main highways and link roads from Sindh and Balochistan across to the Punjab and beyond the Khyber Pass to the Siachen Glacier. All centers were linked by wireless, and I proposed an increase to 500 points in a properly phased out plan. In the second phase of this project, construction of hospitals and traumatology centers for accidents victims were underway at every 100 kilometers, and operations would commence by the year 1997. Rural centers to organize medical aid to poverty and drought-stricken areas of Uttar and Balochistan, Cholistan, and Thar and Sindh were established with 25 centers in the Thar area alone. By 1997, the second phase of the project, the second phase of this rural development program, uh, would establish specialized awareness centers at every 20 kilometers of Pakistan, providing literacy, medical care, sanitation programs, safe drinking water, immunization, and community support on a self-help basis. Midwives provide door-to-door training, courses, and medical students to administer inoculation had been recruited. We were in the process of negotiating with teachers, students, doctors, and the medical faculties to partake in this scheme. 60 emergency posts were set up as focal points for civil defense and routine checks on public gatherings and processions, facilitating launching the site of a calamity within minutes. Mass campaigning against social evils like narcotics, family planning, illiteracy and hygiene, guidance and assistance to illiterate people, and organization of local welfare activities were in operation here. The completion of this project would cover 99% of the urban population with services provided at their doorstep. 15 ED homes called Apna Ghar supervised the influx of destitutes, runaways, and psychotics, and were established in Karachi, Hyderabad, Multan, Lahore, Peshawar, and Quetta. More than 3 million children had been rehabilitated and reunited with their families, and over 80,000 psychotics and drug addicts had been rehabilitated and returned to their homes. Over 1 million children had been delivered in 10 ED maternity homes, and over 20,000 abandoned newborn babies had been saved under our Cradle Home scheme. Six nursing schools in Karachi provided basic training courses over by which over 40,000 women from backward areas have become economically independent with ED training certificates. 8 ED hospitals in 4 provinces provided free medical facilities. A six-story building comprising a 200-bed hospital had been constructed in Musa Line's highly populated area. It facilitated a fully equipped delivery room, operation theatre, X-ray facilities, and an analysis unit, a 50-bed eye hospital, and 5 diabetic centers were operational in Karachi, Hyderabad, and Multan. Surgical units and specialized centers for renal and cancer patients would become functional by the year 1995 to 1996. 30, 33 dispensaries operated in main cities and in Azad Kashmir, Chang and Taxila. 15 mobile dispensaries that served at least 1 million people and provided emergency services to over 2 million people during ethnic and linguistic riots and other public disruptions. Easy village constructed on 65 acres of land on the superhighway consisted of 8 blocks of buildings, of which 5 were operational. 2,000 boys were accommodated in 4, while the fifth served as a drug rehabilitation center. Within the year, I proposed to upgrade rehabilitation by converting the addict section into an associated training center for industrial skills. Towards this goal, a ballpoint pen manufacturing plant was underway. I envisaged an education scheme that, apart from reading and writing, covered care and clerical training. Those who graduated and opted to work with Foundation would be provided marriage expenses, wages, and retirement allowances. The purpose was to mix communities, creating a missionary zeal and a sympathetic society. The Buffer Zone Center for Mentally Disturbed Women incorporated a specialized psychiatric clinic. In North Karachi, a hostel and training center for 2,000 women was fully occupied. It comprised 252 rooms and 88 halls towards a teaching center for foreign languages and industrial training. All centers provided free family planning in association with the Family Planning Association of Pakistan and free immunization in association with UNICEF. 8 warehouses stored provisions, 5 of which were on standby for any national calamity. Supply of rations for refugee camps and delivery of free mutton to government hospitals, sanitariums, and poor people was constructed from here. The foundation fed 1,000 patients daily at government hospitals. Over 1 million handicapped persons had been provided free hospital beds, wheelchairs, suction units, oxygen cylinders, and crutches from these storage units. By the year 1997, public kitchens with basic food rations for the poor, would become functional in all major cities of Pakistan, drought-stricken areas, and all third world countries. The foundation maintains six graveyards in main cities. By the year 1990, the foundation buried over 200,000 unclaimed bodies. A morgue with the capacity for 60 bodies operated at Surabkot. Two blood banks at Karachi supplied 80 pints of blood daily to government hospitals. Drug banks at Multan and Karachi supplied essential medicines to government hospitals as well as stored and delivered medications to all our dispensaries. We ran three veterinary clinics for animal care and provided a 4-acre animal sanctuary on Karachi's highway. The foundation provided legal aid by which we had guaranteed and secured the release of approximately 3,000 kinless and psychotic prisoners, and our commissioned doctors attended to prisoners in various jails on a regular basis. The relief to prisoners was provided in the form of food supplies and the distribution of books, stationery, sports equipment, televisions, clothing, blankets, and gifts on special occasions, as well as an ambulance service. Aid to defectees of the Persian Gulf War in 1991 and to the earthquake victims of Iran was provided in the form of blood plasma, medicine, and surgical instruments. In 1992, aid was provided to earthquake victims in Cairo. In the same year, financial and travel assistance was provided to Pakistanis stranded in Kuwait during the Gulf War. Release of prisoners and detainees involved in minor immigration irregularities at Iraq and Romania was secured in 1993-94. In 1993, the Edhi Foundation, in collaboration with the Pakistan Army, supplied rice and edibles to Mogadishu in Somalia. Again in 1993-94, the supply of relief goods and assistance was extended to camps in Croatia. Continuous relief work was undertaken at the lines of control in Azad Kashmir. The foundation had provided funds and relief rations to the influx of refugees from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Kashmir, Kurdistan, Burma, Nepal, Somalia, and Uganda. Provisions and an ambulance were handed over to the Bosnian refugees camps in Islamabad. Branches of Edhi International Foundation become operative in providing welfare services to Asian settled in USA, UK, Hungary, UAE, Canada, Bangladesh, Japan, Afghanistan, India, Sri Lanka, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Russia. The second phase of our development would begin in the year 1994. I gazed up at the unassuming, innocuous, and accessible old building at Meethadar. It was symbolic of the conditions of the majority of people the world over. The people I had accomplished from here were essentially due to the driven passion of faith in the labor of mind and body. It was visible in all places that said ET. A study of the network would adequately prove its ingenuity. The long process of social awareness had commenced without counting on success. The word ED subtly raised the issue of charity, self-help, humanitarianism, perseverance, and goal orientation. Soon it would lead further, and other concepts would unravel. Without the curse of boards and committees, it had become a one-man show. An army of volunteers, my dedicated team as well as the keys were in a sense invisible. It had been a crucial factor towards accomplishment and highlighted the foundation's rejection of personalities, emphasizing the importance of the system. The ED Foundation was in fact a system of control centers practically feasible for third world countries to adopt. It also offered many lessons to the West. I told a foreign delegation who came to visit me at Meethadar, Europe does not have centers on main highways at every 25 kilometers. A nationwide system providing vaccinations, basic welfare services, and an ambulance facility able to reach the remotest village within minutes does not operate in the West, as it has become functional in a country that has no health provision. It is not worthy of a survey. I had lost no time. In fact, I had been so consumed by the furor and euphoria of achieving uplift for the millions that inhabited my person that I failed to note that very person's dependence on another, on Bilqis, my attention was drastically drawn to this vulnerability. One of my colleagues requested my wife to assess a family in the neighborhood before he consented to a proposal of marriage for his daughter. Zenith and Bilqis walked across to the building, and suddenly Bilqis was overcome with weakness. She sat down on the stairs, requesting Zenith to go up and form an opinion. By the time Zenith returned, Bilqis' face had contorted with pain and beads of sweat ran down her forehead. She felt her body breaking. Zenith pleaded that they go at once to the hospital, but Bilqis pacified her and slowly walked back towards each other. Outside the nearby street shop, her feet fumbled and she fainted. When she regained consciousness, she rested a while on the pavement, sipping water and ignoring everyone's prayers that she rushed to hospital. The two women resumed the journey to Rabia Ma's home and finally Bilqis lay down, but the pain persisted. Until at last she let Zenith take her to Jinnah Hospital in rickshaw, so that I was not alarmed. I was informed on the telephone. At the hospital, I was told that Bilkis had suffered a severe heart attack. I balanced myself. I sat down, holding my heart, its rapid beat and anxiety of the unknown. I had taken her presence for granted. Losing her had not even crossed my mind. Her unconditional love had succeeded so well in camouflaging an inevitable reality. Now the prospect dawned, and I felt the pillar that steeled me suddenly weakened. Hopelessly frightened, I cried and prayed for her and for myself. I could not imagine life without her. The sight of Bilkis under an oxygen tent, with tubes running into her body, reinforced the reality. I remained beside her until she opened her eyes. In them, I detected her characteristic concern, only for me. If she could have spoken, she would say, I promise I'll do well. Don't be afraid. I'm still here. Bilkis remained under intensive care for 12 days and in the cardiac ward for another 12. During the day, Khala, Rabia Ma, and our daughters took turns to take care of her. I visited her for an hour after dawn and again at night. At both times, I controlled my emotions while she, despite instructions to remain silent, tried to reassure me. I would try to quieten her, but she always managed to convey her worry for me. God will not take me from you. He has gifted your life to mankind and mine to you. Have faith in him. I would quickly say, I know, don't talk, don't even think but please. But yes, I was petrified of the sheer enormity of the consequences, and my suspicious nature increased the phobia. In the ambulance driving away, I would think God might want to test me in isolation. Bilki's support compensates for the lack of all others. When I was with her, she would smile faintly, still mischievously, and brainwash me softly. He'll protect the foundation. If it's good for you, if it's good for that, I live. Mitadhar fell into a gloom. Escaping, I moved from one center to another, one emergency to another, but the worry followed. I had analyzed the subject of death so often and concluded the issue by rejecting dependence on any relationship. Now I vacillated, tried to expel the idea. Had it pulled me back repeatedly? Losing her was a possibility that my stubborn nature resolutely refused to either handle or come to terms with. The fear loomed even when the doctors discharged her. Bilkis commanded strong feelings of love. They were now expressed with an explosion of joy at her homecoming. I myself could talk of only one subject that day, and announced everywhere, even to shopkeepers in the alley, laughing joyously, Bilkis is coming home today, she's home, she's coming back. Now we'll hear her constant chatter and complaints about money will begin. Inwardly, anxiety did not decrease for a single moment. She was a clever woman, with a casual yet pronounced effort. She took the sensitive matter in hand as soon as she settled into her bed. Responding strongly at my initial interference, she said, I know my worth to you. I'll do whatever possible to avoid dying. Stop interfering and worrying about my work. Soon she had wiped out that event and made sure that her illness became invisible to me. The Edhi Foundation was not a hereditary concern, and towards establishing that, I spent many years working on its institutionalization. The shock of my wife's ailment made the matter urgent, and I finalized a plan, drafting the constitution and setting up a board of governors. At this point, I also decided the burial place to Bilkis and myself. She embarked, you have been preparing for our departure from the world since my illness. Nobody deals with death in such a manner. Now you talk of nothing else. Imitating me, she mocked. When we die, Bilkis, when we have buried Bilkis, when we have gone Bilkis, she shook her head at me. The years you spent instilling your work in my mind were lighter. Death is too heavy. But reality had hit. As much as I could not accept life without her, I easily came to terms with both of us departing. 70 kilometers from Karachi on the main highway leading north into the Grand Trunk Road stood the 65-acre grounds of Edhi village. I declared the land in front of its boundary wall as our resting place. Aware of the temperament of man, I announced to my wife they would make a big shrine for us, a mazar for a saint. People would come from far and wide to pray for their needs. Bilkis frowned disapprovingly. Why do we need that? I want to be buried somewhere quiet. Why must we rest amidst the fumes and noise of heavy traffic? I responded brightly. Why should we waste our deaths and die away? Our graves will benefit the mentally disturbed. We shall stand guardian over them forever. Bilkis still argued against the idea. Let the remaining mortals deal with the world. It will be our time to rest and be together at last. I ignored her little suggestion, and the decision was final. Outside our shrines, I had put a large money box with a banner saying, Give charity for the handicapped, or else I stretched my arms, pointing forward and declared, Accident? Accidents common on the highway. Soon stories would spread, myths would circulate, and nobody for the love of life would pass by without contributing to the fund. From it, I would run the mental home forever. When Bulkis understood that, she giggled at the trap I was planning. Death did not alter much for me. I had died long ago, and diminished the distance as well as the difference between life and death. Both were one and the same. My grave was part of a continuing scheme that by no means deviated from my principles. Let them know I plan to trap them into giving charity. Let them also know that the pressure is genuine and the game is true. Uh, Fear for life is a great motivating force, and there is good reason to exploit it. It is a noble cause that only furthers God's methods. Do good, or else you'll die in hell. The subject of death began to follow me. It continued to demand concern and attention at a subjective but important level. Bilkis's elder brother, Mahmoud, was rushed to the hospital with a chest pain. When my wife heard, she dropped everything and sped to him. She read his name on a notice board announcing the death, but the ambulance had gone, and she ran to the road, hailed a rickshaw, and returned to Khalida to be with Rabia Ma. Bilkis wept inconsolably, and in condition caused me worry. I tried to control her pain, never take anyone's death to heart, Bilkis. Remember God by the equality with which He implements it. Nobody is different, the richest to the poorest. From here to the end of the globe, faced equally. As an example of equality, when I felt disoriented with anxiety, she was quick to notice and resumed work the very next morning. I returned to finalize plans towards our institutionalization. For the purpose of efficiency and quick dispensation of schemes, I categorized 16 sections with separate reserve funds under the Foundation's main board. Distribution of funds to all 16 sections would be released from profits. Government's help, foreign aid, and donations from people would not be required. Loans as small as providing funds for 5 years, 5 hens, 2 goats, or 2 cows for a regular income were developed, according to my experience, and were based on the essential and basic needs of the majority. Animal welfare, small housing loans, specialized treatment, ambulance purchases, national calamities, prisoners' relief, running expenses, and long-term projects would operate on the basis of applications to the concerned section's administration. Speedily conducted formalities were based on our simple and basic pattern. Loopholes of corruption were virtually impossible in our tested methods. Attained victory in elections through captive vote banks, I explained. The need for welfare has become greater than one can comprehend today, as it is the only hope for the underclass. It will not be curbed. No other slogan is relevant or true. If there is no response to this call, we shall see the rise of dacoity, kidnapping, murder, and violence without any moral control. How can you expect moral control from people upon whom vulgar examples have been thrust for centuries? I would warn them. The people have shown exemplary patience. They have, however, remained unnoticed and ignored for that quality. When 1% of the population rules over 99%, where should the majority go? Where should they migrate and become homeless refugees? Advise us, tell us where we should go. Suggest a holocaust to wipe us clean. We expect you to come up with that solution. I told many senior journalists the example of Edhi Foundation stands in contradiction to the hollow slogans, articles, statements, and speeches of politicians. If the people could only observe, I told them to ask the politicians on the people's behalf, show us your work. Come up front, all you who were in authority for years. What did you deliver? What did you give the nation for the honor and position it bestowed upon you? Come forward and tell us. Why do you lurk in the shadows? Nothing is for free, not for us and not for you. Settle our debt. Then there would be times that Edhi would get angry. At these times, I found it difficult to stop. Did I have power? Was I even literate? Did I have support? A constituency that elected me from the times of my forefathers? The difference was that I was a public servant and their generation adopted personal prosperity as a vocation. Over 4 decades of public service had neither changed my habit of cleaning gutters, sweeping the office, scrubbing the toilet, or washing my clothes. Those who today passed judgments on my credibility had also not changed their characteristics. In 1993, President Ghulam Asad Khan used his power again. This time, he dissolved the government of Mian Nawaz Sharif, and another interim government announced yet another general election. I shook my head. The opposition never waits for the mandate to end. From the time of the announcement of election results, they intrigued for change. The government spent its threatened tenure to cash in on the period of prosperity, hanging on, eating up whatever is possible, covering its tracks and throwing dust in the eyes of the public until the opposing party manages to push it out. These repeated family feuds work primarily against the country. It is a tribal system in a democratic garb. By providing welfare to its citizens, the West ended hundreds of years of similar exploitation and disorder. Welfare had proved to be the only democratic method, whereas we were moving backwards at an alarming pace. While big industrialists evaded tax and the trade of weapons and heroin flourished underneath, no reforms were possible, not without the leadership's serious intentions and long-term vision. Those who labored under the burden of small loans were ground in the mill of exploitation and became subservient slaves. The upper class bred on this crime. Each province in turn raised a slogan that further divided and instilled hatred. All were contenders in a power race. The caste system of Pakistan that pits Jat against Rajput and Sayyid against Arain further undermined national unity. God, I tore his woolly book. When Benazir Bhutto returned to power in 1993, When Benazir Bhutto returned to power in 1993, I hoped she might have learned some lessons but expressed doubts. Are those surrounded by the scraping and bowing of colonial subservience ever provided the chance to learn? Even during the dark days of opposition sycophants invest in potential leaders. Never averse to surround famous people with political futures, they hijack the period of reflection, while leaders delude themselves with ideas of friendships in adversity. Any hope of change was a fleeting thought. I was fully aware of its impossibility. Bilkis was to attend my colleague's daughter's wedding, but she was dithering while Rabia Ma was insisting. Sometimes you have to extend yourself beyond the boundaries of your person. It was not my habit to associate with anyone beyond the sphere of work, and so Bilkis did not bother to ask me to accompany her. She complained of lethargy. I don't feel like changing my clothes. I'll just iron the ones I'm wearing and use them again. Khala gave her a gold bracelet, coaxing, "At least wear this. They'll think you made no effort for them." Pulkis pushed it away. I don't know why, I don't feel like it. My mood is bad. My concern for her health became visible and she eased it. It's only a bad mood, the kind you have all the time. I suspected she was removing a burden from my heart and knew she was carrying one herself. Within an hour, she returned to meet her, sat across my desk, and sighed. I remained restless. I could eat nothing and talk to nobody. Rowdy children ran between long lines of chairs and disturbed me so much that I left. It was unlike Bilkis. I asked if she felt unwell. She quickly shook her head. No, no, but a sadness descended upon my heart. I suggested she go home and rest. She left. Her worry remained with me. In Kharadar, Rabia Ma was breathing under an oxygen mask. Bilkis' brother Iqbal stood beside her while the doctor searched for her veins, then removed her to the hospital. Bilkis did not inform me until she returned to meet her. I jumped up. Why did you not send for me? I would have gone with you, she replied cheerfully, somewhat unnaturally. What would you have done for her? She's much better now. They'll send her back in the morning. In Kharadar, Rabia Ma was breathing under an oxygen mask. Bilkis Ach. We walked together to Kharadar, and I noticed that the earlier disturbance on Bilkis's face had vanished. She heated my food, chatted, and laughed with me while I ate. At the same time, she assisted Almas' son Ahmed with somersaults, turning him over and over, tickling him in his stomach so that he rolled on the floor and roared with laughter. Her drama came to an abrupt end when Almas and Zinat came in weeping. Rabia Ma had died of heart failure. Immediately and without looking at Bilkis, I went outside and stood on the road. I could not console with my wife. The loss was graver than words of condolence could convey. The news spread through the narrow alleys and into the overpopulated buildings of Kharadar, Mithadar, Chaba Gali, and the interconnected bazaars. People began gathering to await the angelic woman who had lived so peacefully amongst them since 1947. Soon an ED ambulance drove in with Rabia Ma's body. It was carried out on a stretcher amid silence. There was no wailing. Her own dignity had descended upon all who knew her. Nurses and midwives she had trained collected throughout the night. In the early hours of the morning, she was bathed by her students. She offered her funeral prayers. We offered her funeral prayers and carried her charpai on our shoulders towards the graveyard. Apart from the shuffling of feet on soft ground, the silence remained unbroken, as each man moved away from shouldering the burden of her coffin. When my place was taken by another, I stood aside to watch the funeral drift on the gentle waves of respectful people. Amongst them, I saw my brother Aziz. I walked behind the procession of mourners, recalling the funeral of our mother. When I laid Rabia Ma down to rest, I remembered how she, like my mother, had not left Bilqis for a day before leaving forever. Turning from her as abruptly as I had done from my own mother, I left. It was her time to confront the Creator in isolation. My mother in law had retired from work only 15 days ago. These past few days, I had observed the serenity on her face. It bore signs of nobility. She had, she had instilled values in Bilqis that had made our work possible. Bilqis's unlimited devotion to me was solely due to her support. She had brought up our children, compensating for our absence so that none of them felt any neglect. Her contribution to the service of mankind was visible by the thousands of women and young girls she had trained without any personal gain or salary. She left behind more than most people do: respect, hope, and dignity. When I faced Bilqis, we cried together, then sat up all night talking about the loss of her closest ally. The next morning, Bilqis resumed her duties just as I had done after my mother's death. Had become visible again. My mind became resolute towards providing for the time after us, and I announced at a meeting of my colleagues, we do not need another Edhi, another leader, we need a system. Now, my dear readers and viewers, this is exactly what I say as well. I must say that great minds think alike, and Edhi and I have a lot of similarities in our thoughts at least. Maybe not in other things. A system that will create its own people, one better than the other. I have already created such a system. It's called CRS Cube. More about it at a later time. Man is undependable. He is born to depart and can therefore offer no security. We can depend only on a system. As was usual with me, work became more compelling after a tragedy. It was a potent antidote against personal loss. Whenever I had to face the adverse effects of an advice my wife might have given, I easily blamed her. Yes. I think most echo would perhaps relate to Edhi on this, most men. And continue with her chores, quickening her pace, while I followed at her heels, grumbling and accusing. Except that you gave me wrong advice, Bilkis. You made a mistake. She went from one medicine cabinet to another, to the storeroom, up the stairs, and into the maternity unit and back. I followed behind her. It is better for a wife to be docile, non interfering, and meek. They women always create whirlpools of trouble. Why don't you agree with that? Is it not true? On her toes, hands reaching up, she deliberately fixed the linen cupboards and ignored my yells for her attention. Only propagandists do patrao bilgis. They throw small stones at intervals, then stop to return another time. I believe in one stone. Brave men always throw one stone. You make me go wrong. Finally, I would give up and walk out. Then only did she sit down holding her head. Much as I tried to control the human weakness of holding my wife responsible for the outcome of a faulty decision, I failed. Every time I saw her during these times, I complained. Women are a disaster. They influence you to make mistakes. You should not interfere with my work again. She would laugh at me. In that case, you'd be safe in Meetadar and there'd be nothing to discuss. When she grew tired of the subject, she would snap. Why do you listen to me? Are you the man in charge or I? I deserved the remark that placed an extra burden on my shoulder. The property of the ED Foundation exceeded 100 crore rupees in value. And readers, we are talking about 1992-93. The quarter percent pending construction work was to be provided from profits, so that capital remained untapped. With the completion of this phase, the deficit between spending and saving would decrease and profits would be diverted into saving schemes. Within 10 years, the capital would double itself. A rise in prices had, however, slowed the pace of our expansion, and we were spending when, according to our time frame, we should have begun saving. For various reasons, many people had warned me against investing in Pakistan. I had disagreed. I think Zardari and Nawaz Sharif needs to listen to his advice. If vested interests become afraid of our expansion, if they confiscate or usurp my work, I will fight them from abroad to accomplish the goals I set out to achieve. But the foundation's asset belonged to the nation. All investments were made with the government of Pakistan and aimed to eventually lessen the burden of welfare on the state. Whereas Western countries collected regular tax for welfare, I envisaged a system that would run from an income collected within a 7 year time frame. The sale of tokens in the 7 year scheme would secure annual expenses and build a reserve fund for circulating costs. No further public relations would be required. Continuous fundraising from meager private resources was not advisable. I explained to an economist, after 7 years, I plan to run the foundation on investment profits and large scale projects will be undertaken from loans on capital. Short term and long term expansion shall simultaneously continue within the 7 year collection target. 100 crore rupees for running expenses and 100 crore towards saving reserves would ensure recycling. I elaborated the program to the economist. When the state owes us such large profits, the foundation influences on government programs in the welfare sector will become strong. Then we are in a position to collaborate with the state and sanction the upgrading of government hospitals and welfare schemes in all sectors from our own funds. The people will become directly involved with public uplift. I explained further. Despite the dire circumstances that Pakistan has witnessed over the last 5 decades, the people of this nation have unconsciously created their own system, a system of self help by the people and for the people. They are its sole inheritors and will protect it when they know what they have achieved. The foundation had framed an economic program that would ensure health facilities. Will this not result in a peaceful revolution? I laughed with the learned man. They don't believe it because it makes no noise. Although an increase of corruption, exploitations, and laziness was replacing enthusiasm all over the world, and welfare system in Western countries were also adversely affected by this menace. Their basic structure was correct. The socialist system failed because of a welfare collapse. Welfare was in fact failing everywhere. Changes and improvement were imperative to restore it. I had retrieved the essential missing point from their idea and moved steadily towards achieving the goal they had lost sight of. I was winning back what some had lost and some were losing. I announced at the meeting 60% of our mission has been achieved. Legalities and operational schemes, future projects, and methods of implementation have been finalized. Only 40% is pending, and that is basically development and finance. Naturally, those who are astute realize the extent and implication of our work and fear redundancy. When I explained the network to the chairman of a semi government corporation, he remarked, Edhi Sahib, why is it that highly educated bureaucrats, technocrats, economists, and philosophers have not thought of this? I pondered over the question honestly before responding. Perhaps God took this work from me because I am from a business community. I could have been a good banker or an industrialist, but I envisaged this form of public industry instead. By no means did I claim to have planned the outcome of my work. At the advent of my mission, I had considered the options of health, education, and general welfare. Nature had worked towards new openings in thoughts, and although I had concentrated on health with an urgency, mass literacy and general welfare had been incorporated into the system. We were in the first stage of that expansion. It was the gift of nature, I presume. The chairman was visibly pleased. By and large, we aimed at manufacturing our own pharmaceuticals. Those manufactured for us by private companies would be based on our own color schemes, I explained to the chairman. The implementation of one policy is processed through many stages. In the final stages of this program, we will supply medication to all government hospitals. Moving step by step is the priority. We are in no rush to achieve success. When the chairman said, Edhi Sahib, this is a peaceful revolution, I was glad he understood that. I had always relied on my kashkol and never moved back from saying, I can sit on a footpath for 360 days a year and begin again. I'll beg the nation to donate once in their lifetime. Now I explained our plans to many people. A 10 rupee contribution of 1 million people once in their lifetime will secure the establishment of a system for them. By the end of the next 6 years, ambulance charges will be waived and they will notice the progress. In 15 years, results will be apparent across the country. Within 30 years, our investment will provide 99% people with services at their doorsteps. When people feel confident, public respect will be achieved, and the superficial benefits provided by sardars, peers, and tekadars will be rejected. The langars of the mashayikh that provide meals outside shrines is not a movement towards rehabilitation. Although the running expense of the organization is annually audited and assets have been declared, because of vested interests, many schemes remain dormant. My belief that confidences disclosed beforehand are detrimental, perhaps remain predominant. Secrets and a tightly closed fist are highly beneficial. That's something I need to learn. I would tell my colleagues, when the time is right, I will open my fist and let them out. Bilkis would shake her head in disbelief. What are you all about? Sometimes I wonder about you. Are you human? Each token sold in the 7 year scheme was either with Bilkis's or my signature. The use of income was visible in projects as well as in our way of life, by which example I expected trust. When somebody accused me of spending on my person, I sighed. No one so far has asked where I acquired the fleet of ambulances and airplanes from. To those who put their trust in me by dedicating their lives to financially rewardless work, I said, be assured that if I am legally obliged to submit or explain accounts, all records down to the first rupee that I received in 950 is available for review. I know the nature of people and have not been so foolish as to overlook the possibility of that demand. Nowhere have I compromised my position as Amin and yours as my colleagues. This was not our dhanda or business. We had not created it for ourselves. Bilkis and I hoped that in our lifetime we would hand over the foundation to its rightful owners. Then we can retire, I would say, to which she would laugh no sooner than the words left my mouth. Even when you hand over the system, even when you hand over the system, you will not give up interfering with it. Nobody will be able to operate it until you let go. I would chide her for saying that. Why should I do what that when its function is systematic? She would tilt her head, move her eyeballs up towards the sky, and say, your rules and regulations are permanent. You'll be in control even when you have gone up into the sky. Benazir Bhutto became the first Prime Minister to visit the Edhi Foundation. On the morning of her arrival, I paid 300 rupees to get the gutters clean and rebuked suggestions of other methods. I know I can make one phone call to the President or the Prime Minister and use my position. The administration will be pulled up for negligence, and then they will come every day. But that is an isolated correction. When the whole nation is suffering, why should we be different? I want to improve the environment on a wholesale level for everybody, not for myself. To a journalist's query whether I would have accepted an invitation to visit the Prime Minister instead, I replied, if the Prime Minister had invited me, I would have gone to her. False pride is an obvious form of arrogance and becomes an obstacle in the way of work. As long as time is not wasted, I can go anywhere. At the Clifton Center, I spoke to Benazir Bhutto about the welfare ideology. After a welfare system is introduced, 20% of the population will continue to remain exploited, but 80% will come out of the quagmire. God has created two kinds of humans, the persecutors, and the victims. As the world has both grown and become smaller simultaneously, a balance must be created. Only a welfare system can achieve that. Otherwise, weapons and disorder will overthrow us. On our premises, she issued a statement in favor of social welfare. Would she adopt it? Could she? Even making an announcement was a step forward. Following it politically called for radical changes in most matters. Why do we not exceed the 20% ratio of matriculation, and why do women by and large remain illiterate? Was the predominant and complex question of the day. But too many interrelated matters had to be unknotted to give an answer to that. I explained that as the rehabilitation of women was an essential investment towards progress, we had provided economic independence to 40,000 women on our nursing program. The Prime Minister agreed to rehabilitate 50,000 girls on government expense. Again, I hope the decision will be implemented. She also promised to donate a 25-seater plane to the foundation. I hope that it would materialize. I spoke to her at length about simplicity and inflation. As everybody in this country has adopted the principle when somebody else should toil while they eat, drink, and be merry, people had halted in all sectors. New schemes were required to curb the government deterioration. I spoke to her at length about simplicity. as everybody in the country has adopted the principle that someone else should toil while they eat, drink, and be merry. Work has halted in all sectors. New schemes are required to curb the growing deterioration. Those that will make people condemn extravagance and overspending in national as well as personal interest. At such times, inflation is necessary to force a nation back to simplicity. A 3% increase in water and electricity rates will force people to curtail its use by half. In Saudi Arabia, one piece of bread costs 1 real, equivalent to 9 rupees. That is why they do not throw away a morsel. In times of shortage, a spirit of simplicity must be invoked, so that when expenses outweigh budgets, people spend less. I reassured her. The upper classes' sources of income is of such proportion that they will not be affected. Nor is that a problem. As in every epoch, there are people who escape effects, repercussions, and consequences. For them, the situation will remain steady. A surprise at the expansion of the organization came as a surprise to me. Our centers have been operating at every 25 kilometers of the country for some years now, and the ambulance service had been in every possible calamity. As she needed an interim solution before local body elections could be held in the troubled province of Sindh, Ms. Bhutto requested me to take over the rotting administration of Karachi's municipal corporation. I declined, respectfully by explaining that I had too much work to accomplish. She asked for an alternative suggestion. I pointed towards my pilot Fahim Zaman, a People's Party supporter, and Farooq Memon, a volunteer. The Prime Minister ordered Fahim to report to her for further instructions. Before leaving, Ms. Bhutto offered a ticket for the Senate to Bilkis, who later commented, I was surprised that she thought your wife would become a senator. My colleagues were upset at her offering me Karachi's administration. How did she deem it a fit offer for a man working towards changing the world? But my colleagues reacted to many matters concerning me. When a foreign correspondent referred to me as Father Teresa, they corrected him. It's not an apt comparison. Edhi has his own identity. My friends always also complained that although Mother Teresa had been to Pakistan thrice, no one introduced her to me. I pacified them. Because our work is separate to the government and we are not under the pressure of rulers, they naturally prefer to hide it. Many people told me, Edhi Sahib, the West ignores your work because it does not want to give the Nobel Prize to a Muslim. And I would always say, we have made them fearful of anything related to us. Sometimes I would joke, if they start to give awards for our deeds, the world will blow up. Karachi's corrupt administration was rotten to the core, and almost all who worked in it were predators. If spring cleaning was possible, the results would make a huge difference to the prevailing condition, but it was a mammoth task. All ills of society, racialism, ethnicity, sectarianism, class and party politics ran rampant here. I announced at a press conference, Fahim has entered a gutter. If he is permitted to clean it, he will survive. Otherwise, he should resign within 3 months and present the nation with a white paper. The appointment became an allegation against him. Having lost the privilege of sanctions for political plots usurped from state property and public parks, many felt at risk from the intrusion. I announced to the media, daily we purchase water for the centers in Karachi at an exorbitant cost. Midway agents halt passage and demand toll. These are issues that need to be highlighted and are corrected instead of who is Fahim and why is he there. Senior employees of the department approached me with feigned respect and courtesy. It could not, however, conceal their duplicity. When I refused to comply to their subtle demands of cooperation, they returned to their own turf and transformed into lions. A message of warning arrived. Tell Edhi that we respect his work, but he's interfering with ours. We will take revenge. So this man was threatened by Memon Sates. Now he's being threatened by the municipal corporation as well. I abhorred threats and sent their emissary away. Tell them to do so. Why do they come to me with complaints? Karachi's administration is not our problem. Tell them to seek an interview with the Prime Minister instead. My business with Fahim is over. He is her problem. Journalists affiliated with the opposition began to suspect my neutrality and wrote likewise. Benazir Bhutto installed Edhi's man. There was no election. Who is this man? I retaliated. Ask the Prime Minister. I have not installed my son. Impersonating a sycophant, I rebuked the allegation. Have an elected election. Have an election prime minister. Have an elected prime minister. Please don't do it. This way, have an election, Prime Minister. Please don't do it this way, Prime Minister. Please uphold the Constitution, Prime Minister. If my words were so effective, I have been advising governments to adopt a welfare system since the year 1962. Have they complied? It is her job to adhere to constitutional rules, not mine. If I have an opportunity to send a man into a filthy swamp, I will. When when they turned on me for the new administrator's hypothetical future dishonesty, I wondered at the low level of their intellect. They always speculated cynically and created a complicated jumble from mediocrity. I explained patiently. When a doctor leaves a university, its responsibility is over. The institution is not to blame. The institution is not to blame for an individual's professional dishonesty. Now he's gone and it's not my business. It was, however, a mistake to make the suggestion our service was apolitical. My affiliation with the People's Party government was also a speculation born from the one-time rental of the helicopter to Benazir Bhutto during her election campaign. I was absent from Pakistan when the pilot had permitted it. Yes, I had been furious, not at its utility, but that someone had moved without obtaining my permission. I had, however, overlooked it when I understood that Benazir Bhutto had been unwell and could not travel by road. The debt I owed her father was also in mine, and just as I had paid charges for the Chief Minister's plane, I billed her for the service. A funeral attendance in Balochistan, an urgent appointment in rural Sindh, and for speed the helicopter had been rented to other politicians at different times and for varying reasons. Without some assistant, it was an expensive service to run on our low budget. But I balked at involving myself with explanations that proved nothing and led nowhere. The Indian Prime Minister Narasimha Rao announced that social welfare was the only system that could combat the problems of India. Pleased, I took the newspaper to Bilkis. Perhaps we shall see the beginnings of our program for the uplift of the common man in our lifetime. I told the diplomat who came to discuss the issue with me. When politics, religion, and human rights fail, only collective welfare is a savior. Clearing one gutter cannot clear the block gutters of a nation. A complete cleansing is required. The sooner heads of state and politicians recognize this fact, I will feel confident. At last they saw. It had taken them long to find the most effective political slogan. During these past years, many people had told me, Edhi Sahib, you must come into politics. There is no other way to implement your system. I did not agree. My opinion was based on an extensive socio-economic study. The people of the third world have adopted patience as their favorite slogan. In Pakistan, they have existed for 47 years without a system. Once one federal and four provincial parliamentary factories have produced industrialists, feudal lords, black marketeers, and smugglers, hereditary shareholders without any questions raised to their contribution, qualification, or merit. This elite rotates. One group bids higher and buys members from the others. When its strength increases, it cancels the board. Then one re- then uh, then one replaces the other, and they go round in circles. What can I contribute there except increase my nuisance value? But to those who were too weak to raise their voices against the political occupation of Pakistan, or to those who were too preoccupied in making two ends meet, and to those who had withdrawn in the face of disillusionment and obstacles, I said, could I have or influenced 260 odd families in parliaments? Could I have fought their malignant spread in every direction and in every sector of society with anything better than the implementation of solid work? That, alongside corruption and exploitation, my way is the only political way. If the politicians were suspicious, their preoccupation with themselves continued to distract them. I continued talking to all those who came to me. They can fight, die for power, snatch and claim countries, call each other martyrs or traitors. My struggle is of a different nature. Call it Islamic or un-Islamic, but do not overlook its fundamental principles. That which resolves the issues of the poor, the nearly dead, the ill, and the overwhelming majority of peoples of all nations. It offers an improved world order with peace as its slogan. At the same time, it gives clemency to culprits. I warned a group of officers. I am pointing out the impending danger from the majority. Instead of ED welfare services, I could have purchased weapons and formed political cells at every 25 kilometers of Pakistan. University students could emerge from all over Pakistan. They are my recruits, my workers for deliverances from exploitation. Yet I have not spent a rupee on arms nor allowed any section of the organization to take part in politics. I offer an alternative, a collective welfare system that can contain damage as well as maintain the status quo. I have the game in hand today. The system can be changed without bloodshed, without incurring a single death. The foundation's roots are deep. Its basis is wider than conducting warfare. So take heed and study my project carefully before somebody without my vision rises to confront you. In 1993, I spoke at a newspaper forum in London. Traders are sycophants of the Chamber of Commerce, and businessmen have become dacoits. How is it that the ruling elite have become so rich while the nation has become so poor? Was Muhammad Ali Jinnah their father's munshi? Did he deliver them a jagir? They simply hijacked the homeland when we were too young to know what we that we were again captive. It was time for powerful enemies. Exile allegations, planted firearms in my office or under my bed were options at the hands of those who perceived danger from my direction. For the same reason, I continued to keep Qutb and Faisal away. There was no need for them yet. Their lives would come to the Foundation's use another time. If the US will not keep you, go to other countries, become laborers, sell matchboxes and newspapers, never betray a country that offers its hospitality to you. Return them your labor and stay away from Pakistan for now, I had advised. At a fundraising function in New York, I expressed my irritation at the ongoing demand for financial help towards the pilgrimage. I explained my own understanding of the instruction. When poverty prevails amongst your relative and in your neighborhood, Allah demands that you use your common sense. Hajj does not absolve you of sins until you contribute to obliterating the pain that surrounds you. Love of mankind is love of God. There is no other way of loving Him. At another fundraising function, I objected again. You have spent $4.5 million towards a mosque when another stands just 1.5 kilometers away. Reevaluate your priorities and your responsibilities. Humanitarianism strengthens belief in Allah far more strongly. People had conveniently forgotten that I propagated a concept that Sufi saints had already preached, that preaching was essentially based on a way of life and the elevation of pain and hunger. The humanitarian traditions of Sufism spread Islam in the subcontinent, and and Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, and Muslims were equal before God. The inspiration derived from Sufi character was an advantage to our faith, and the tolerant and refined image of Islam was the ideal that was accepted. I told a man who came to tell me a scholar's point of view. I cannot agree with limited interpretations. If religious leaders would open their eyes and ears, they might know the consequences of history and retract while there is still time for them. Humanitarianism is my religion, and that is the purpose and meaning of all religions. I had advised many historians, as our knowledge is based on hearsay, we cannot take full responsibility for Islamic history. It is riddled with distortions. We can only make mistakes in our conclusions. Whatever we have heard, wherever we could reach, we have arrived by our own thought processes. Only one factor was never under dispute: humanitarianism. That was page number 390. Amazing. In the year 1994, Pakistan Civil Aviation Authorities invited representatives of foreign aviation companies to view an exercise for a jumbo jet crash landing at Karachi Airport. Our ambulances were in standby position at respective centers. The exercise commenced, and within 4 minutes, three reached the aircraft from Rig Road. Within 7 minutes from Lavir, 7 from Malir, 11 from Landi, and within 13 minutes from Surapur. Within half an hour, 45 ambulances had sped with passengers to the Jinnah Hospital, and the exercise concluded in an hour. When impressed foreigners inquired about our method, I told them it is based on simplification of complicated matters. Pursuing truth always results in excellence. In Japan, a psychotic man had perplexed the immigration authorities for over a year. He would tell them nothing more than his name and that he came from a place called Attock. Where was Attock? Nobody knew. Eventually, they discovered it was in Pakistan and contacted the consulate, which in turn had no idea how to trace a man's whereabouts in a large district. When the search was abandoned after 2 months, the ED center in Japan was contacted. We received the information by fax, informed Islamabad on wireless, and the information was relayed to Attock. The man's name and circumstances were announced on loudspeakers until an informant arrived at the Attock center. We obtained the address of the patient's father, a trader in a nearby village, and within 6 hours faxed it back to Japan. In New York, a man from Punjab had an accident and remained under treatment in a hospital for 3 years. His address was not known, and the authorities contacted our New York center. We traced his family within 3 days. When a man was murdered in New Jersey, his brother referred the case to us. We in turn contacted the US Police Department, arranged his removal from their morgue, and transported his body back to Pakistan. After many such cases, the Americans inquired from our center, who is this man Edhi? Pakistanis usually appear on the scene after months of hassle. The police department of US, Canada, Japan, Britain, and many other countries were in touch with us on a regular basis. Kubra had become totally devoted to the children at the Clifton Center. Having lost all interest in her appearance, she was usually seen with a dupatta tightly wound and knotted around her head. She had maintained her silence. Nobody knew when she painted, or if she painted at all. Almas once mentioned to me, the only expression of Kubra's sorrow is that she keeps enlarging and replacing Bilal's photographs in her room. She has not changed her stance on marriage, and although Bilkis and I prayed that she might one day settle down, neither of us wished to disrespect her emotional privacy. Bilkis was visiting Zenith. Almas left her 1.5-year old son with them and went for a quick visit to a relative Javed in hospital. The two women played a while with the child when they became engrossed in talking. Little Ali crawled freely through one of the two doors leading to the bathroom, and they imagined he must emerge from the other, which opened into the adjacent room. When when Zenith's husband Asif returned home, he walked into the bathroom, screams broke, the women's conversation, and they ran to see him. Was head down in a bucket of soapy water. When Asif pulled him out, he was limp and his color was purple. The three of them frantically pumped his chest and hit his back, but nothing happened. Asif ran to get transport. Bilkis wailed, "What will I say to Almas?" She could not wait for Asif to return. She could not wait for Asif to return. She hung the child across her shoulder and ran down the stairs and out of the building into the main road. Hailing a boy on a scooter, she jumped behind him, crying and hitting the child on his back, pleading, "Ali, cry, cry, please. Ali, cry, please cry." There was no sign of life in him. They were stuck in a traffic jam. She jumped off the bike and ran on the footpath towards Wharton Market and into connecting alleys. Her feet stepped on each other and fumbled. She kept running, still hitting the child hanging across her shoulder. "Ali, cry, please cry, Ali, cry." At last she arrived at Midazar. When I saw her panting and him blue, I touched his pulse without looking up. There was no time. With sirens blaring, the ambulance sped them to the civil hospital. In the meantime, Almas became restless and rose abruptly with an urge to return to her baby. Outside Zenith's building, a neighbor informed her of the mishap. She became hysterical, hailed a rickshaw, and reached the emergency ward of the hospital. Simultaneously, a nurse came out to take a sheet and Wilkie thought it was to wrap the child's body. Almas charged in, saw her mother weeping, barged into the cordoned off room, and and fainted when she saw doctors pumping her child. The soapy liquid spilled out, and Ali cried. It was a miracle. I had, in fact, thought him dead at Meet Angrily, I scolded Bilkis and Zenith. Women make sure that problems circulate around them so that men are always disturbed and their work disrupted. For me, Bilal's attraction did not exist in any of my other grandchildren. I told Bilkis, those who have a short life have an extra magnetism which keeps them alive in the hearts of those who leave behind. After Bilal's death, I had been overly conscious of not loving another grandchild too much. Ali's accident again through water confirmed that I was correct. This is the end of chapter 11. Thank you. We shall now proceed to chapter 12.